Rain came down in hard sheets that night, blurring the headlights along the empty highway outside of Ashland, Ohio. Jake Miller tightened his grip on the steering wheel, fatigue weighing heavy on his shoulders after another 12-hour shift at the auto shop. In the back seat, his 4-year-old son, Noah, slept soundly, his small hand clutching a worn-out stuffed dinosaur. For Jake, every mile he drove was a reminder of the life he had been forced to piece together alone, raising a child after being abandoned, scraping by paycheck to paycheck, and wondering if this was all his life would ever be. When the gas gauge dipped close to empty, he pulled into a quiet station on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered weakly against the storm, casting broken light across the wet pavement. As he stepped out, the rain immediately soaked through his jacket. He had just started pumping gas when a sound pierced through the storm, soft, muffled, but unmistakable. It wasn't the wind, it was crying. Jake turned and spotted her. Sitting on the curb near the air pump was a young woman, drenched from head to toe, her hair plastered to her face, her arms wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. She couldn't have been more than 26, but the weight in her eyes told another story. She was shaking, both from the cold and from something deeper, fear, exhaustion, despair. For a moment, Jake froze, torn between the instinct to mind his own business and the pull of a compassion he couldn't ignore. Life had kicked him down enough times to know how it felt to be left out in the rain. He crouched down, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you all right, miss?" The woman lifted her gaze, her lips trembling. She didn't answer right away, only hugging her belly tighter, as if shielding the child within from the world outside. Finally, she whispered, almost inaudibly, "I have nowhere to go." Those 5 words cut through Jake like a blade. He saw not just a stranger, but a reflection of his own battles, the nights he'd held Noah as a baby, wondering how they'd survive, the endless shifts, the loneliness that gnawed at him. In her eyes, he saw the same kind of fight, the same desperation to protect something precious. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story, or the storms that had driven her to this lonely gas station. All he knew was that walking away wasn't an option. That night, beneath the pounding rain and the failing neon light, 2 lives collided. And neither Jake Miller nor the woman crying in the shadows could have imagined how profoundly that encounter would change everything. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and pine trees. Jake's small cabin, tucked away at the edge of a wooded clearing outside Ashland, Ohio, was never meant to hold much more than the essentials. 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen with cupboards that always seemed half empty, and a wood stove that worked harder than any man could. For Jake and his little boy Noah, it was enough. Life there was simple, stripped of luxury, but it was honest. That morning, for the first time in years, another presence filled the quiet. The young woman from the gas station, she had introduced herself shyly as Anna, sat at Jake's worn kitchen table, wrapped in one of his old flannel shirts, her damp clothes tumbling in the dryer. Noah, still clutching his stuffed dinosaur, sat across from her, studying her with the innocent curiosity of a child who had never known a stranger to sit at his breakfast table. Jake brewed coffee, his movements awkward, uncertain. He wasn't used to guests, let alone a pregnant woman whose eyes carried a storm heavier than the one that had battered the highway. He slid a chipped mug toward her, and she smiled faintly, as if the warmth of the drink reached something inside her chest that had long been cold. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice cracked around the edges, the way voices do when someone hasn't been thanked or cared for in a very long time. As days bled into weeks, Anna's presence began to settle into their lives like a melody that belonged to a song all along. At first, she stayed in the guest room Jake had barely used, the one with peeling wallpaper and a quilt his mother had sewn before she passed. She was quiet, moving softly as if afraid to disturb the fragile rhythm Jake and Noah had built. but little by little she became part of it. She cooked meals that turned the kitchen into a place of laughter again, pancakes shaped like dinosaurs for Noah, hearty stews that reminded Jake of the dinners his mother used to make on cold winter nights. She hummed while she stirred the pot, sometimes pressing a hand absent-mindedly to her growing belly, and Noah would mimic her tune, giggling. In the evenings, after Jake returned from long shifts at the garage, he found her reading stories to Noah by the wood stove. Her voice, soft and steady, painted dragons and castles in the air, while Noah's head grew heavy against her arm. Jake would pause in the doorway, watching the scene unfold, something in his chest tightening. It was a picture he hadn't dared to imagine, family, not broken, not abandoned, but whole. Yet the cabin wasn't just warmth and ease. There were moments when Anna's guard slipped. Jake would catch her staring out the small window over the sink, eyes distant, fingers clenched around a dish towel as if bracing herself for a storm no one else could see. Once, late at night, Jake woke to the sound of muffled sobs. He stood outside her door, torn between walking in and giving her space. In the end, he chose silence, but his heart ached with the weight of questions he didn't ask. Anna, for her part, noticed things about Jake too. The way he worked himself to exhaustion, his hands calloused from fixing cars all day, his shoulders sagging under burdens no one helped him carry. She saw how he never complained, how he tucked Noah in with tenderness that broke her heart. She saw the loneliness he tried to hide beneath his strength, and so, without realizing it, they began to fill each other's cracks. One Saturday, when the autumn leaves had turned the woods outside into a sea of red and gold, they decided to take Noah on a picnic. Jake built a fire pit near the clearing, and Anna brought sandwiches wrapped in brown paper. Noah raced around the trees, chasing squirrels, his laughter echoing like music through the branches. Anna sat on a blanket, leaning back on her hands, sunlight catching the auburn in her hair. Jake watched her laugh at something Noah said, and in that moment he felt something shift inside him. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once, the thought that he could feel again, that maybe, just maybe, his life wasn't meant to end in loneliness. But with that hope came fear. Jake knew nothing about Anna's past except the fragments she let slip, the way she avoided questions about family, the way her smile faltered whenever Noah asked if she had a husband. He wondered who had left her pregnant and alone at a gas station in the rain, and why. He wanted to ask, but he held back. Trust, he knew, was something you built slowly, like stacking wood for a fire. Pushed too hard, and the whole thing collapsed. Still, Anna gave him glimpses of truth in unexpected ways. One night while they washed dishes together, she whispered, "You don't know what it means to feel safe for the first time in years." Her eyes shimmered, and Jake wanted to tell her he did know, that safety wasn't found in big houses or money, but in the quiet moments when someone chose to stay. By the time the first snow fell over Ashland, Anna wasn't just a guest anymore. She was woven into their days, into the way Noah reached for her hand when crossing the yard, into the way Jake found himself making 2 cups of coffee instead of 1 each morning. She was no longer the girl crying on the curb of a gas station. She was a piece of their family, fragile and unexpected but real. Jake didn't know what the future held. He didn't know the secrets still waiting in Anna's silence, or the storms they might face. But as he watched her sit by the fire one winter night, reading to Noah while the snow piled against the window, he knew one thing with certainty. Life had finally given him something more than survival. It had given him hope. Winter in Ashland had a way of making everything feel smaller. The woods that once looked endless now stood quiet under blankets of snow, their branches bowing low with ice. Jake shoveled the path to the cabin each morning, his breath visible in the frigid air, while Noah built lopsided snowmen and laughed at his own creations. Life had fallen into a rhythm, hard work, small joys, evenings by the fire. But even in that peace, Jake sensed something lingering. Anna was hiding a storm inside her. He noticed it in the way she tensed whenever an unfamiliar car slowed on the back road near the cabin, or the way her eyes flicked to the window at night, as though she expected someone to come looking. Jake had never pressed her for answers, but her silences weighed heavier by the day. Then, one bitter evening, everything unraveled. Jake was outside stacking firewood when headlights cut through the trees. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the cabin, so out of place against the snow and mud that Jake's gut tightened instantly. Two men in dark coats stepped out, their polished shoes sinking into the slush. They didn't look like lost travelers. They looked like trouble. Anna froze when she saw them through the window, her face drained of color, and the glass of water she held slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Noah, startled by the noise, clutched at Jake's leg as he came rushing in. "Miss Whitmore," one of the men said smoothly, removing his gloves as though he owned the place. "You've caused quite the concern." Jake's head snapped toward Anna. Whitmore? He'd never heard that name before. He looked at her, waiting, but she couldn't meet his eyes. The men stepped forward, ignoring Jake entirely. "Your family's been searching. It's time to come home. This detour of yours has gone on long enough." Anna backed up until her shoulders hit the kitchen counter, tears brimming in her eyes. "I told them I'm not going back. Not like this." Her voice shook, but her hands protectively covered her belly, as though shielding her unborn child from the weight of the world pressing in. The taller of the two men sighed. "You don't have a choice. The board expects a wedding and your father's reputation—" "Enough!" Jake's voice thundered through the small cabin, his protective instincts flaring. He stepped between the men and Anna, fists clenched. "You need to leave, now." The men exchanged a glance, almost amused. "Mr. Miller, is it? You have no idea who you've taken in." Jake's jaw tightened, but his focus remained on Anna. "What are they talking about?" Anna sank onto the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. When she finally looked up, her voice came out in a whisper. "My name isn't Anna Cole. It's Anna Whitmore. My father owns Whitmore Industries. I was supposed to marry a man I didn't love to protect the company's image, but then I found out he was cheating on me with my best friend, and still, they wanted me to go through with it, for appearances, for power." The truth hung heavy in the room. Jake stared, stunned, as her confession spilled out. "I couldn't do it," she continued, her voice cracking. "I couldn't bring a child into a life built on lies, so I ran. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could start over, here with you and Noah." Her words cut deep, not because of her past, but because Jake finally understood the shadows in her eyes. The nights she cried silently in the dark. She wasn't just some lost girl he'd rescued at a gas station. She was a woman who had chosen honesty over wealth, love over power, and it had cost her everything. The men shifted impatiently. "Miss Whitmore, your family won't tolerate this any longer. Come with us, or we'll make sure Mr. Miller regrets interfering." Jake moved forward, his voice cold steel. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to, you hear me?" The threat in his eyes was enough. The men hesitated, then finally turned back toward their car. "This isn't over," one warned before the sedan disappeared into the trees, leaving silence behind. When the sound of the engine faded, Anna broke. Her body shook with sobs as Jake knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands into his. Noah climbed into her lap, pressing his small hand against her belly as if even he understood she needed comfort. "I'm sorry," Anna whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "I should have told you. I was so afraid, and that once you knew who I really was, you'd see me differently, that you'd think I was using you or pitying you. And the truth is, I don't want to go back to that life. I just want this." Her gaze swept over the cabin, the fire crackling Noah's sleepy eyes. "I want this family." Jake's throat tightened. He had spent so many years feeling unworthy, convinced no one could ever truly choose him. And yet, here was Anna, richer than he could ever imagine, but desperate for the very simplicity he thought was his curse. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. his voice steady. "Anna Whitmore or Anna Cole, it doesn't matter. All I see is the woman who makes pancakes with my kid, who laughs like she belongs here, who made this house feel like home again. If you want this life, then you're already part of it." For the first time, Anna let out a breath that sounded like freedom. The storm of her secret had broken, and in its wake she found something she thought she had lost forever. Hope that someone could love her not for her name, not for her wealth, but for who she truly was. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the world in silence. Inside the cabin, 3 hearts beat in fragile unison, bound together not by blood or name, but by choice. And though neither Jake nor Anna could see what battles still lay ahead, both knew that night had changed everything. For a little while after that night, life inside the cabin felt fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. Anna had confessed her truth, and though Jake had promised it didn't matter, something unspoken hung in the air. The revelation of her name, Whitmore, had changed the way Jake saw himself more than it changed the way he saw her. He carried it quietly, the weight of comparison. When he fixed cars at the garage and wiped the grease from his hands, he thought of the boardroom she had once walked, the luxury she had turned her back on. When he sat at their small kitchen table, he noticed the wobble in the leg, the chipped edges of the plates, and wondered if she was simply enduring it, if every part of his life reminded her of how far she had fallen. Anna, meanwhile, noticed the distance creeping in. Jake still smiled at her, still tucked Noah in at night, still split firewood with the same steady rhythm. But he no longer lingered at the table after dinner. He no longer paused in the doorway when she read to Noah. He no longer met her eyes the way he once had, with the quiet awe of a man who couldn't believe he deserved such a gift. One evening, as snow fell heavy outside, Anna found him repairing a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight. She approached slowly, her voice soft. "Jake," she began, "talk to me, you've been different." He didn't look up. Nothing's wrong, just tired. But she knew better. She moved closer, her hand brushing against his arm. "It's me, isn't it? Since that night. Since you found out who I am." Jake finally turned, his eyes shadowed. "I keep thinking about it, Anna. You're a Whitmore. You could have anything, houses, money, a future without worry. And here you are, stuck in this rundown cabin with a mechanic who barely makes ends meet. I can't shake the feeling that one day you'll wake up and realize this was just a phase, that you'll walk away and I'll be left explaining to Noah why you left." The words cut deeper than he meant them to, but they were his truth. Years of abandonment, of people walking away, had left scars he couldn't ignore. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "Jake Miller, do you think I care about any of that? Do you think I stayed because I pitied you? I stayed because for the first time in my life I feel like myself. You don't see it, but you gave me something no amount of money ever did. A home, a family. Love that doesn't come with conditions or contracts." He looked away, fighting the storm inside him. "And what if I'm not enough? What if one day when things get hard you remember the life you left behind and decide this, me, Noah, this cabin, isn't what you really want?" Anna stepped closer, her hand cupping his cheek. "Then let me prove it to you. Let me show you every single day that I'm not going anywhere. Because, Jake, it isn't about what I left behind. It's about what I found here. With you." Her words pierced through the walls he'd built, but fear still clung to him like frost on glass. For a while, silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the wood stove. Then, as if summoned by fate, Noah padded into the kitchen in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mommy Anna," he mumbled, reaching for her. The name slipped out naturally, unplanned, yet it rooted deep in Jake's heart. Anna knelt, gathering Noah into her arms. She kissed the top of his head, tears falling freely now. When she looked back at Jake, her voice broke. "Do you see? He already knows. This is where I belong. This is our family." Jake's chest tightened, his defenses finally giving way. He crouched beside them, pulling both into his arms. For the first time, he let himself believe it was possible. That love could stay. That family could be chosen, not just inherited or broken. But love's truth always demands its test. Weeks later, word came from town. Rumors spread of Whitmore Industries sending private investigators, of headlines speculating about Anna's disappearance. The pressure mounted, seeping into their quiet life. One night, Jake overheard a conversation Anna had with her father's attorney on the phone. Her father was offering her a deal: return, marry the man chosen for her, and all the chaos would end. Jake's chest burned with anger and fear. He couldn't stand the thought of losing her, but he also couldn't stop the whisper in his mind. Maybe she would take the offer. Maybe she'd realize he was right all along, that he wasn't enough. That night, when she returned inside, he confronted her. "Tell me you're not considering it. Tell me you're not going back." Anna's face crumpled. "I'm not going back, but Jake, don't you see? As long as I'm here, your life, Noah's life, will be under a spotlight you never asked for. They won't stop, and I can't let you suffer because of me." Jake's voice cracked with desperation. "Don't you understand? You and Noah, you're my life. I don't care about the rest. What I can't survive is losing you." Her tears fell, but she smiled through them. "Then stop pushing me away. Stop doubting what's already here. Because I'm not leaving, Jake. Not now, not ever." And in that moment, the last of the walls between them broke. He pulled her close, their foreheads touching, the weight of fear finally melting into the warmth of truth. Love wasn't about being enough or not enough. It wasn't about wealth or poverty, power or obscurity. It was about staying when it was easier to run, choosing each other when the world screamed otherwise. And as the snow continued to fall outside, Jake knew one thing with certainty. Anna Whitmore wasn't just a woman he'd saved on a rainy night. She was the woman who had saved him right back. Spring arrived slowly in Ashland, the snow melting into streams that carved through the woods. The cabin, once buried under white silence, now stood surrounded by green, the earth alive again. Yet inside its walls, life was not the same. Despite their promises, the pressure from Anna's family grew relentless. Letters arrived from attorneys, men in dark suits parked near town, and whispers followed Jake every time he drove into the garage. The small life they had built, one of pancakes, bedtime stories, and quiet evenings, suddenly felt like it was balancing on the edge of a blade. One night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Anna sat across from Jake at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she folded and unfolded the same napkin. "I can't keep doing this to you," she whispered. Jake's chest tightened. "Doing what?" "Dragging you into a war you didn't choose. They're never going to stop, Jake. Not until I go back and face them." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her jaw was steady. "If staying here puts you and Noah in danger, then leaving is the only choice I have." The words struck him like a hammer. He wanted to argue, to forbid her from even thinking it, but he saw the resolve in her eyes. She wasn't giving up on them. She was trying to protect them. "Anna," he said, his voice breaking, "don't you see? You are our family now. Noah calls you Mommy Anna. I can't lose you." Her hand reached across the table, resting against his rough, calloused fingers. "You won't, not really. But if I don't face them, they'll never stop coming. And you and Noah deserve peace." That night she packed quietly. Jake tried to stay strong for Noah, but when Anna kissed the boy's forehead goodbye, Noah clung to her, sobbing, "Don't go, Mommy Anna, please." It nearly broke her. She promised him she would come back. She promised Jake the same. And then in the pale dawn she left, her figure fading down the dirt road like a dream slipping away. Days turned into weeks. Jake tried to keep life steady for Noah. School runs, dinners, bedtime routines. But the cabin felt emptier than ever. Noah would often wake in the night asking if Anna was home yet, and Jake had no answers. In the quiet hours he sat by the fire, staring at the door, replaying her laughter, her smile, the warmth she had brought into the hollow spaces of his life. Meanwhile, in the city, Anna faced her father's empire. The Whitmore name was plastered across newspapers, speculation rampant. But Anna stood tall. She refused the marriage, exposed the deceit of her so-called fiancé, and reminded the world that she wasn't a pawn in her father's business. For once she lived not by his rules, but by her own. It was a fight that nearly broke her, but she carried with her the memory of a little boy's arms around her neck and a man's steady voice telling her she was home. Months later, on a warm June evening, Jake was repairing the fence by the cabin when Noah's shout rang through the yard. "Daddy, Daddy, look!" Jake looked up and froze. There, walking up the dirt road with a suitcase in one hand and tears in her eyes, was Anna. For a moment he thought he was imagining it, another dream conjured by longing. But then Noah bolted toward her, launching himself into her arms, and Jake's heart knew the truth. Anna dropped to her knees, hugging Noah tight, kissing his hair. Her eyes met Jake's over the boy's shoulder, shimmering with both apology and hope. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered. Jake didn't move at first. He had built walls against disappointment, against the possibility that promises could be broken again. But as she stood, as she crossed the yard with Noah clinging to her hand, the walls crumbled. She stopped in front of him, breathless. "It's over," she said. "I fought them. I walked away from all of it. I don't want their life, Jake. I want ours, if you'll still have me." Jake's throat closed, words failing him. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, the smell of her hair, the warmth of her body, anchoring him in a reality more beautiful than any dream. Noah wedged himself between them, giggling through tears, and for the first time in months the cabin yard echoed with the sound of joy. That night, as fireflies lit the woods outside and the summer breeze drifted through the windows, the three of them sat together by the fire. Noah fell asleep between them, his small hand resting against Anna's belly, now rounder with the promise of new life. Jake looked at Anna, his voice low but steady. "I was so afraid you'd leave for good, that I'd never see you again." Anna's fingers brushed his cheek. "I did leave, but only so I could find the courage to come back. Us, it's not temporary, Jake. It's forever." And in that moment, Jake realized something he had never dared believe. Broken lives could be rebuilt, families could be chosen, love could stay. The cabin, humble as it was, no longer felt small. It felt like the center of the world, a place where a weary mechanic, a resilient woman, and a wide-eyed little boy had chosen each other, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And sometimes, Jake thought, that was the greatest kind of miracle. Summer in Ashland carried a sweetness that no other season could match. The woods around the cabin hummed with life. Crickets sang at night, fireflies danced above the grass, and the creek behind the house sparkled in the sunlight. For Jake Miller, these simple things had once felt empty. Now, with Anna and Noah by his side, they felt like blessings too rich to measure. It had been months since Anna's return. Her family's pressure had faded like an old echo. Newspapers eventually moved on to new scandals, and the Whitmore name continued in the business pages without her. But Anna didn't care. She had found her place in the rhythm of a quiet, ordinary life, and she cherished it with all her heart. In the mornings, she brewed coffee while Noah chattered about school and Jake read the paper with grease still on his hands from early shop repairs. On weekends, they walked down to the farmer's market, where Anna laughed freely as Noah sampled honey sticks and tugged on Jake's arm to buy kettle corn. At night, the three of them would sit by the fire pit outside, watching stars blink into the dark sky. Yet beneath the joy, Jake carried a question he'd never voiced aloud. Could this happiness really last? After years of disappointment of being left behind, he sometimes woke in the night half expecting to find her gone. But every morning, Anna was still there, her hair tousled, her smile sleepy, her hand reaching for his. Little by little, his fears began to loosen their grip. One evening, as cicadas hummed in the trees, Anna called Jake and Noah out to the porch. Her eyes sparkled, but her hands trembled as she placed them on her rounded belly. "It's time you both knew," she said softly. "The doctor confirmed it today. We're going to have a baby." For a heartbeat, silence held them. Then Noah shouted with delight, running to hug her waist, his small hands pressed against the promise of his little brother or sister. Jake stepped forward slowly, as though afraid to believe it. His calloused hand joined Noah's, resting over Anna's stomach. And for the first time in his life, Jake felt something he had thought was impossible: completeness. He met Anna's gaze, emotion tightening his throat. "You've given me more than I ever dreamed I could have. A son, a home, and now this." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but her smile glowed. "We've given it to each other, Jake. We built this together." As the weeks turned into months, the cabin filled with preparations. Jake built a crib by hand, sanding every curve until it was smooth as glass. Noah painted little stars on the nursery walls, giggling as he left smudges of blue on his cheeks. Anna folded tiny clothes, her heart swelling at the thought of the life they were about to welcome. But perhaps the most healing moment came quietly, without fanfare. One rainy afternoon, Anna sat with Noah at the kitchen table, helping him with his spelling homework. Jake watched from the doorway as Noah suddenly looked up and asked, "When the baby comes, will they call you Mommy too?" Anna froze, her eyes darting to Jake, but Noah's face was earnest, waiting. Slowly, Anna nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, sweetheart, they will, and you already do." Jake's vision blurred as he stepped into the room, pulling both of them close. That one word, Mommy, was the final piece of a puzzle he never thought would fit. By winter, when the first snow dusted the woods again, their daughter was born. Jake held her in his arms, her tiny fingers wrapping around his thumb, and he whispered a vow he'd never spoken before, that he would protect this family with everything in him, that he would never let fear steal their joy again. Anna, exhausted but glowing, leaned against him, watching as Noah gently stroked his baby sister's hair. "Look at us," she whispered. "A family, not perfect, not easy, but ours." Jake kissed her forehead, his heart swelling until it hurt. "The best kind of family," he murmured. Life in the cabin didn't suddenly become easier. Bills still came. Work still demanded. The world outside still carried its storms. But inside those walls, laughter and love had built a fortress stronger than wealth, stronger than fear. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the fire burned low and the children slept, Jake would sit with Anna on the porch, her hand warm in his, and marvel at how far they had come. From a rainy gas station to this, two broken souls who had found healing not in what they escaped, but in what they chose to build together. He would look at her then, her hair glinting in the starlight, and think, this is what forever looks like. The second winter after the baby's birth came harsher than anyone in Ashland expected. Blizzards rolled through the mountains, cutting off the back roads, and temperatures dropped so low that pipes froze and trees cracked under the weight of ice. The cabin that had once been their sanctuary now groaned against the storm's fury. Jake worked tirelessly to keep the generator running, chopping extra firewood until his hands blistered. Anna bundled the children in layers of quilts, her heart tightening every time she saw her husband stumble into the cabin with exhaustion in his eyes. Noah, now old enough to understand, tried to help, carrying kindling in his small arms, his determination a mirror of Jake's. The baby, Emily, cried at night when the wind howled against the walls, but Anna held her close, whispering lullabies until sleep finally came. One night as the storm raged outside, the generator sputtered and died. The lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving them in darkness lit only by the fireplace. Jake cursed under his breath, reaching for his coat, but Anna caught his arm. "Jake, it's too dangerous out there. You'll freeze before you fix it." He looked at her, torn between fear for his family and the instinct to act. "If I don't, we'll lose heat. Emily can't—" Anna's hand pressed firmly against his chest. "We'll make it through the night, together. Don't you see? You don't have to carry this alone anymore." The words stopped him. For years, Jake had been the one to bear the weight. Alone, silent, convinced that love meant shielding others from every blow. But now, staring into Anna's determined eyes, he realized what partnership truly meant. So they huddled by the fire, the four of them wrapped in blankets. Noah told stories about brave knights and dragons, his voice carrying over the howling wind. Anna laughed softly, her arms cradling Emily while Jake pulled them all closer, his heart pounding not with fear, but with gratitude. For the first time in his life, he understood that survival wasn't about strength alone. It was about love that bound them together, love that turned fear into courage. When morning came, the storm had broken. The world outside was buried in snow, glittering under a pale sun. Jake managed to restart the generator, but the night had left something deeper than relief. It had left proof. Proof that no matter what storms came, they would endure. Not because they were unbreakable, but because they were united. Months later, another kind of storm arrived. One not born of weather, but of the world beyond their woods. A letter came from Whitmore Industries, this time not a demand, but a plea. Anna's father had grown ill, the empire he built now cracking under the weight of scandal and poor decisions. He asked for her help. The request unsettled everything. Anna sat at the table with the letter trembling in her hands. Part of her still longed for reconciliation, the small piece of a daughter who had once wanted her father's approval. But another part, stronger now, knew that returning to that world meant risking everything she had fought to build. Jake watched her silently, torn between wanting to protect her from more pain and fearing she might choose the past over the present. Finally, she looked up, her eyes steady. "I need to see him," she said, "not to go back, not to save his empire, but to say goodbye to that life, to close the door myself." Jake swallowed hard, then nodded. "Then I'll go with you." The trip to the city was a test in itself. Flashing cameras, reporters shouting questions, whispers following their every step. But through it all, Anna held Jake's hand, her spine straight, her voice calm. When they finally entered her father's study, she found a man smaller than the one who had once towered over her life. His voice cracked with regret, his pride dulled by time. "I thought I was protecting you," he admitted weakly. "But all I did was chain you." Anna's heart broke and healed in the same breath. She forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because she deserved peace. And when she walked out of that house with Jake and the children, she knew with absolute certainty that she was free. Back in Ashland, life moved forward. Seasons changed, the children grew, and the cabin walls bore witness to both laughter and tears. There were still hard days, sickness, bills, arguments that left silence hanging heavy. But there were also good days, birthdays with homemade cakes, summer afternoons by the creek, Christmas mornings when the children's squeals filled the air. And through it all, one truth remained unshakable. They had chosen each other, again and again, against fear, against storms, against the ghosts of the past. On a quiet autumn evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the woods in gold, Jake sat on the porch with Anna. The children played in the yard, their laughter echoing like music. He turned to her, his voice rough but tender. "You know," he said, "I used to think love was something other people got lucky enough to find, that it wasn't meant for men like me. But then you walked into that gas station and everything I thought I knew changed." Anna leaned her head on his shoulder, her smile soft. "Love isn't luck, Jake, it's choice, and I'd choose you 1,000 times over." Jake kissed her hair, his heart steady. For the first time in his life, he believed it completely. No matter what lay ahead, storms or silence, success or struggle, they would face it together. Because family wasn't about the blood you were born into or the wealth you inherited. It was about the people who stayed, the ones who chose you again and again. And as the stars began to appear above the trees, Jake realized that the greatest miracle of his life wasn't survival. It was love that lasted. The years passed gently in Ashland. Noah grew taller, his once clumsy legs now carrying him across the football field with confidence, while Emily, bright-eyed and fearless, chased her brother through the woods behind the cabin. The little house that had once sheltered only Jake's loneliness was now filled with echoes of laughter, muddy shoes by the door, and the steady warmth of love that no storm could shake. Sometimes, late in the evening, Jake would sit on the porch and watch his children chase fireflies, Anna's laughter drifting across the yard like music. He thought back to the night he found her on the curb of that gas station, broken and alone. Neither of them could have imagined how far they'd come, from strangers bound by hurt to a family bound by choice, and that was the heart of it. Family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you build out of ashes, the one forged through storms and second chances. Jake and Anna had proven that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain, but about refusing to let it define the future. Together they had written a new story, one where love was stronger than fear, and where broken pieces fit together into something beautiful. As Jake held Anna's hand and watched their children grow, he finally understood. Life's greatest gift isn't found in wealth, status, or the approval of others. It's found in the people who stay, the ones who choose you day after day when the world tries to tear you apart. Life lesson. No matter how lost or broken you feel, there is always hope. Love doesn't erase the scars, but it transforms them into reminders of how far you've come. Family isn't defined by bloodlines. It's defined by loyalty, by courage, and by the simple act of choosing to love, even when it's hard. If Jake and Anna could rebuild their lives from pain and betrayal, then so can we.